Hello, my name is Stephen Wright. I'm a career coach here at Career Mentor, and we help high-performing financial services professionals make their next smart career move. So in this brief video, I just want to talk about how to prepare for a job interview, especially when the information that you've been given about the role has been a little bit thin. Now, this may be because it's just an initial chat, an exploratory conversation, or it may be that you are a candidate amongst others in a formal recruitment process. But how do you prepare for a job interview effectively? I think there are 7 ways. Let's go through them. The first is to have a really good knowledge about the firm that you're going to be interviewing with. This is pretty easily done because most of the information is readily available either by Google or other websites, and also on the company's website itself. So you're going to be able to look at things like the products and services, the size of the firm, the ownership of the firm, the key members of its leadership team, their performance, their geographies, and in particular the division that you're going to be interviewing with. So have all that information to hand. Also, it'd be a good idea if you're able to understand if that firm has been in the news recently, and also what's going on with their competition and how well is that firm performing relative to their competition. That is all good information to have. The second point is to research the person who you're going to be interviewing with. And this is easily done as well because you can look them up on Google and on LinkedIn and get a good feel for what that person's career has been all about so far. Also, it's really useful because you might find some points of commonality that you have with that person, people you know or places that you've worked, and you can use that in the initial rapport building phase of the interview. The third thing is a little bit more tricky to understand, but it's worth doing if you can, and that is to get a sense of what the culture of that firm is all about. So that perhaps can be found by looking at the values that the firm talks about on its website, but also you can speak to anybody who you may know who is currently working at that firm, or perhaps people you know who have since moved on but were working at that firm, to get a sense of the culture of the organization. The next thing, number 4, that I want to talk about is the job specification or any briefing that you may have had, no matter how thin it might have been. And I just offer the idea of being a little bit cautious about this for 2 reasons. The first is that the job spec that you have been given, or the briefing that you've been given, may have been written or created some time ago. And over the course of the interviewing process, now that that firm has met a number of people, their view as to what they're looking for will have matured and evolved and may be quite different from what they wrote some time ago. So that job spec is now out of date. The second reason to be slightly cautious about any briefing you receive is that the person sitting in front of you has their own opinion, their own views on what is required for this particular role. So it's important to interview with that person and deal with their view on what's going on and what's required, rather than any out of date or inaccurate information. The next thing to think about is your questions for them and to have them prepared. So I divide those questions into 2 parts. The first is your questions for them about the role. So that may be, how has this role come up? What are they looking for in this role? What will a successful candidate look like? And what will this role be expected to deliver in that particular job? So those are the first ones. The second type of question are those which you may get the opportunity to ask towards the end of the meeting. As the meeting is beginning to wrap up, they can say things like, well, have you got any questions for us? Now, this is a great opportunity to ask 1, maybe 2 questions which will help clarify how well this job and this firm matches with your own criteria. Next thing to think about is to have 4 or 5 discrete ways that you can articulate the ways in which you can add value to their business. And for each one of those ways in which you can add value, to have an example or an anecdote or a mini case study that gives evidence that you can in fact deliver on the promise that you're making, and have those ready to hand. The final thing to think about are the questions that you can anticipate that they're going to ask you and have answers ready for them. So questions like, what are your career ambitions? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Those are pretty obvious and you can prepare answers for them. But also there may be questions more specific to you, such as why were you at XYZ Bank for only 18 months? Why did you move from here to there? What's this gap on your CV? So have answers ready for all of those things. Final thing I'd say is that for you expressing and articulating the way in which you can bring value, your questions for them and the questions that you anticipate that they will ask you, have all those well rehearsed so that you can move through the interview in a really smooth manner. I hope you found that useful. I'll be putting a link to the blog that I wrote about this in the comments below, and thanks very much.